It was early spring, just before dawn, around 5 a.m. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that clings to your skin and makes your breath fog. I was a volunteer firefighter back then, living in a small rural town where calls were rare but always urgent. That morning, my radio crackled to life, shattering the silence of my bedroom. The dispatcher's voice was tense, clipped. Single vehicle MVA, car versus tree, possible injuries. Respond immediately. I threw on my gear, my heart already pounding. The address was a lonely stretch of Route 17, a winding road flanked by dense woods and sprawling fields. As I sped toward the scene, the horizon was just beginning to glow with the faintest hint of sunrise. My mind raced with possibilities: drunk driver, medical emergency, or just someone who fell asleep at the wheel. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. When I pulled up, the scene was chaos frozen in time. A car, or what was left of it, had slammed head-on into a massive oak tree at the edge of a hayfield. The impact was catastrophic. The vehicle wasn't just wrecked, it was obliterated, reduced to a twisted skeleton of metal and plastic. Shards of glass glinted in the dim light, scattered across the road like a shattered mirror. The hood was crumpled like tissue paper, the engine block shoved into the passenger compartment. And beyond the tree, stretching into the hayfield, was a trail of debris, car parts, personal belongings, and something else. The other responders were already there, their faces pale under the flashing red and blue lights. The air smelled of burnt rubber, gasoline, and something metallic, blood. We didn't know how many people were in the car, or if anyone could have survived. I'd seen miracles before, people walking away from wrecks that should have killed them. But this felt different. The destruction was absolute, and a heavy dread settled over us as we were given our orders. Search the hayfield, inch by inch, for survivors or remains. The hayfield was vast, the golden stalks swaying gently, knee-high, catching the first rays of sunlight. We lined up shoulder to shoulder, a grim procession of firefighters and EMTs, our boots sinking into the soft earth. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil and hay, but there was something else too, a faint, acrid whiff of death. We moved in a grid pattern, eyes scanning the ground, stopping whenever we found something: a hubcap, a shredded tire, a chunk of dashboard, and then the remains. Small, unidentifiable pieces at first, marked with orange flags for the hazmat team. Each discovery made my stomach twist. We didn't talk much. The weight of the task silenced us. Then I saw it, half buried in the hay, glinting in the dawn light, a DVD. Its case was cracked, but the title was clear, graphic, unmistakable: porn. I froze, unsure if I was imagining it. I called out to my partner, who was a few feet away. He trudged over, his face tightening as he saw it too. "What the hell?" he muttered. We kept moving, and then we found another, and another. Scattered among the car parts and human remains were DVDs, hundreds, maybe thousands of them. Bootleg porn DVDs. Titles I won't repeat, images that made my skin crawl. They were everywhere, like some grotesque confetti scattered by the crash. We learned later that the driver was alone, a man in his late 30s, a reseller of bootleg adult films. His trunk had been packed to the brim with these DVDs, and the impact had launched them across the field. But why? Why was he driving at 120, maybe 140 miles per hour, on a rural road at 5 a.m? Where was he going in such a reckless hurry? The speed was insane, suicidal, almost. The car had disintegrated on impact, scattering his life, his secrets, across that field. As we continued our search, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the hay. Each step felt heavier, the DVDs crunching under our boots. We marked more remains, each flag a grim reminder of the man's fate. By the time we confirmed he was the only occupant, the field was dotted with orange markers, a macabre map of the crash. The largest pieces of the car were loaded onto a trailer, the remains collected in hazmat bags. But the DVDs, no one touched them. They stayed there, abandoned, a strange monument to a man whose story we'd never fully know. I drove home that morning. The image of that field burned into my mind. The DVDs, the remains. I still think about that man sometimes. Who was he? Why was he carrying a trunk full of porn, racing through the night like his life depended on it? Was he running from something or to something? I'll never know. Back then, I was a firefighter, stationed just outside a mid-sized town where most nights were routine. False alarms, chimney smoke, the odd traffic call. That night was different from the moment the radio crackled. We were halfway through dinner when dispatch came through. Major collision. Lorry and private vehicle. Fire on scene. Unknown casualties. I remember someone dropping their fork and saying nothing. We moved. By the time we arrived, the lorry driver had already been pulled clear, bruised but alive. His rig had jackknifed into a ditch, the front end smoking but intact. The car was a different story. A compact hatchback, if you could still call it that, was crushed almost flat against the grille of the lorry. Flames had already chewed through most of it. I didn't think much of it at first. Fires like that happen fast and hot. You learn to focus on the task. Uncoil the hose. Fan out. Get control of the perimeter. Check for spread. The usual. But there was something about the way the smoke curled upward that night. It didn't rise straight. It spiraled and hung in the air, thick and greasy. The smell wasn't just burning rubber or upholstery. There was a sweet, sour edge to it, familiar but wrong. It wasn't until the flames were out that things began to settle into that unbearable clarity. 4 boys had been inside. We found one first, maybe 12 or 13, thrown clear into the grass. His body was twisted unnaturally, but his face was visible. His eyes were still open. It looked like he was trying to say something when he died. Another was pulled out alive, barely. His skin was blistered and blackened, his breathing shallow. I remember someone saying, "He's not gonna make it," under their breath. They were right. He died in hospital a week later. The other 2 never made it out of the car. And I'll be honest, if I had known what we were about to deal with, I would have hesitated. I don't say that lightly, but that wreck, it had turned the inside of that car into something inhuman. The heat had been so intense, the metal had warped and fused with the bodies. The seat fabric was gone. Just exposed steel and melted plastic tangled with flesh. One of the boy's arms had melted into the dashboard. His fingers were buried beneath it. It was like the car had swallowed him. I stood behind him while my colleague tried to break the seal. We couldn't just pull him. The skin would have torn. The bones might snap. It was delicate in the worst way. The kid's shoulder was wedged tight between 2 steel bars. There was no clearance, no way to maneuver without force. So one of us braced against the wreckage. The other raised a pickaxe. We didn't look at each other. He just said, "You ready?" and swung down, not at the boy, but the frame around his shoulder. The sound it made echoed down the road, sharp, hollow, final. Every time the metal rang out, I felt it in my chest. Once we got a bit of room, I slipped the flat edge of a shovel behind his back, levered, pried, shifted his weight. It didn't go smoothly. I had to stop more than once. My hands were shaking. 45 minutes. That's how long it took to get them out. Just the two inside. There's something wrong with how time moves when you're doing something like that. Part of your brain wants it to be over. Another part doesn't want to finish, because once it's done, it's real. When it was all over, we stood around, silent. No one cracked a joke. No one said anything about a drink after shift. We just packed up. A few days later, the reports came in. The car had been stolen. All 4 boys were between 12 and 15. No one knew how they'd gotten their hands on it. No one claimed them right away. Eventually, names were matched to school files. I think that was the part that stayed with me. The silence around it. You'd expect a story like that to ripple. Parents on the news, outrage, investigations. But nothing really came of it. Just a paragraph in the local paper. 4 boys, stolen car, collision, fire. That was it. And I've tried to forget. I really have. You bury it under the years, under the hundreds of other calls. But every so often, something pulls it back to the surface. It was late afternoon when the call came through. Structure fire, full involvement. We knew the address before. Dispatch finished reading it out. It belonged to my friend's family. A place I'd visited dozens of times growing up. The kind of house where the screen door never latched properly and the living room always smells faintly of cinnamon. I didn't think so. I just moved. By the time we pulled up, the place was gone in every way that mattered. Flames were pouring through the windows and chewing through the roof like paper. Orange light danced up into the grey sky. The entire structure was shuddering in heat. And standing on the front lawn, just short of the fire line, was my friend's older sister. She was screaming. "She's still in there." There was no confusion in her voice. No hesitation, just raw panic. Her eyes were wide and locked on the house, her hands clenched at her sides, trembling. That sentence, those words. I've heard it before. People scream all kinds of things during fires, but when someone says that, "She's still in there," everything else falls away. I ran over to her. She was barefoot, ash on her cheeks, coughing, but still screaming. "Is it the baby?" I asked. She nodded, eyes wild. Yes, she's in her crib. I couldn't get to her. The fire started in the hallway. I couldn't get through." I looked back at the house. The baby's room was on the far side, near the back corner. By then, the entire front half of the house was completely swallowed. Flames curled out of every window. The hallway she mentioned would have been the first thing to go. My stomach dropped. Our department isn't trained for interior attack. That's not part of our scope. We focus on containment and suppression. We don't go inside. But I was already moving toward the porch before I realized it. My boots hit the scorched grass. I could feel the heat tightening the air in my throat. The front door had collapsed inward. Black smoke poured out like water. I told myself I could make it. If I just moved fast enough. If I got low. If I could find a path down the side hall. anything. Then, just before I reached the porch, I heard someone scream again, but not in fear, in relief. I turned, confused. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear. And that's when I saw them. 3 figures running up the street. My friend, her other sister, and in her arms, wrapped in a thin pink blanket, was the baby. She was alive. The sister on the lawn dropped to her knees. Her screams turned to sobs. I stood frozen for a second, unable to process what I was seeing. They reached the yard. My friend collapsed with the baby in her arms, rocking her back and forth, checking her face, pressing her forehead to the baby's. I ran to them. "What happened?" I asked. She looked up at me, shaking her head, barely able to get the words out. "I took her to get ice cream. Just 10 minutes ago. She didn't know." She motioned to her sister, still on the ground, hands over her face. "I didn't tell her. I just took the baby and ran to the gas station. I didn't even think to say anything." The fire had started just minutes after they left. Something electrical, later they said. A socket overloaded in the back hallway caught on a pile of laundry. Dry fabric, perfect fuel. The rest of the crew arrived then. We got to work. Water lines dragged out, angles planned, pressure checked. But everyone moved with a strange kind of quiet, like they were trying not to wake something. I kept glancing back at the baby. She was calm now, nestled against her aunt's shoulder, oblivious to the smoke in the air. Safe, entirely unaware that, had things gone even slightly differently, this would have been a very different story. The fire burned hot and fast. We couldn't save the house. The structure was too far gone by the time we could safely suppress it. It collapsed in on itself just before sundown. A small crowd had gathered by then. Neighbours, local kids, people who'd grown up on the same block. We watched the smoke rise, long after the flames were gone. Later, when things had quieted and the family was being checked out by paramedics, I found myself standing alone by the edge of the driveway. Ash stuck to my gloves. My shirt clung to my back. I could still feel the spot on the porch where I almost stepped through, and I couldn't stop thinking about the timing. The way she had taken the baby without saying anything. Just an ordinary decision, a casual moment, a craving for ice cream. If it had happened 5 minutes later, if she had waited to leave, if the fire had started just a little sooner. I try not to dwell on what didn't happen, but this one stuck with me, because for about 30 seconds, I believed I was going to die inside that house, not from fear, but from what I knew I was about to find.